A border security bill is put out by the U.S. Senate, but does everything but secure the border. And in fact, it would codify the process of letting more than 1.5 million illegal immigrants slip into the country each year. At this time, the House leadership for the Republican Party is claiming that the bill is DOA, or dead on arrival. But as you and I know, these things are always subject to change. So what is happening here, and what in the world are these people thinking? The U.S. Senate, you see, has introduced a bipartisan border security bill, officially known as the Bipartisan National Security Agreement, nice name, which aims to address issues related to border security and immigration, but ironically will spend the majority of its money providing foreign aid, particularly to Ukraine and Israel. The bill is currently valued at $118 billion, but more than 60% of the budget will instead be sent to these other countries. Key provisions of the Senate border bill are as follows. First, you have border security funding. Approximately $20 billion will be allocated for enhanced enforcement on the U.S.-Mexico border. There's going to be asylum system reform. The bill is proposing stricter asylum laws, including faster screenings at a higher standard, limited appeals, and expedited deportations, but also will include automatic work permits for those who qualify as asylum recipients. Now, this, of course, will only further incentivize illegal immigration swarms to the border. But let's continue. There will be an emergency authority, which would allow the president to restrict border crossings if daily average immigrant encounters reach a certain threshold, meaning that after nearly 5,000 people cross the border, then the president would suddenly have the authority to act. Now, I have to ask, who do they think they're fooling? The President of the United States already has the power to control the border. For instance, an immigration law provision already allows the presidents to stop people from entering the U.S. if their entry would be detrimental to the interests of the United States. I would argue that this will possibly make it harder for presidents to do anything about illegal immigration going forward if this bill were to pass. Anyway, also in the border bill is the asylum processing, where the legal standard for proof of initial asylum screenings would supposedly be raised, potentially making it more difficult for asylum seekers to pass. And the timeline for this asylum process would be expedited from years to 6 months. Then there would be a construction of the border wall. The bill would mandate the construction of at least 900 miles of border wall, continuing a policy from the Trump administration. And then, of course, as we already touched on, the massive spending on foreign aid in the border security bill. Lovely. So what are the political responses and challenges for this bill? The bill, naturally, has encountered opposition from House Speaker Mike Johnson and House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who have criticized the bill for not being tough enough on immigration and have declared it dead on arrival. There is Republican skepticism. As news outlets have reported, there are some right-wing Republicans who are skeptical of the bill, arguing that it does not adequately address the border crisis. Which I would say, no duh. But of course, the Biden administration is thrilled about all of this and is praising the migration measures in the bill and is urging Congress to pass the bipartisan agreement swiftly. Now, I want to focus in on the poison pill within this bill. The ludicrous rule that thousands and thousands of illegal immigrants can cross the border before the administration can do anything to stop the flow. Okay? The way I see all of this, my friends, is that this bill is designed to fail. You see, if it's not passed because it allows more than 1.5 million illegal aliens to cross the border each year, then the Democratic Party will try and use it as a wedge issue to shift the blame of the illegal immigration away from themselves and onto the Republican Party. They will claim that the Republicans are the ones really at fault here, that it is in fact the GOP, not the Democratic Party, who actually wants the border to remain open. And see, if somehow the bill is actually passed, then they still get their way of letting millions of illegals to continue to cross the border, with the end goal of granting amnesty somewhere down the line, something that they so desperately desire. Now, you might be asking me, well, how can you possibly make such a claim? Why would the Democratic Party be hell-bent on granting amnesty? Well, it's simple. You see, people who come to America, and I'm talking first-generation folks, typically need more government assistance. Not always, of course, but often it is the case. Those who do typically vote for the party that gives them the most free stuff. It's human nature. People do what they feel is best for themselves and their families. And the party that gives the most stuff just so happens to be the Democratic Party. And with the Hispanic population, and this is key here, my friends, in every presidential election, since the year 2000, the Hispanic vote has been no less than 58% for the Democratic candidate. Got it? For example, 2000, Al Gore, 62% of the vote. 2004, John Kerry, 58% of the vote. 2008 and 2012, Barack Obama received 67 and 71% of the vote. And then there was Hillary Clinton, who got 66%, and finally Joe Biden at 59% of the Hispanic vote. Now, to put all of this in context, the average number of people turning out every year to vote since the year 2000, and this is an average, is roughly about 130 million people. The percentage of Hispanics who vote is now around 13%, at 32 million, which, by the way, is up from 7% in the year 2000. So you've got 32 million people currently voting from the Hispanic community, 13%. Now, let's look at the last presidential election. Officially, President Joe Biden is said to have won the popular vote by 7 million people. The largest margin, by the way, of victory in the last 20 years was by 10 million votes, and that was Barack Obama in 2008. Now, this is important, my friends, because there is already here in the United States an estimated 20+ million illegal aliens already within the U.S. border. And it seems to me that this underclass of people that are here in the U.S. represent a potential mass quantity of voters just sitting there, tantalizing the party of big government. Let's just say that half of the 20 million illegal aliens granted amnesty were then to subsequently vote. If 60% of them voted Democrat, you would create an unstoppable political force. It is something that would give generational power to one party in the United States. So this is a big deal. Now, perhaps some of you might want to argue that there just isn't a push for amnesty to happen. Why, our government is all sweetness and light, and we just happen to be suffering innocently under the weight of mass illegal immigration here in the U.S., and that surely our leaders in Washington aren't planning to use these millions of people as a political tool. And if you think this, then I would urge you to think again. You see, over the last 20 years, there have been many attempts to grant amnesty here in the U.S. Here are some of the most notable efforts. 2001, there was the DREAM Act. This is when it was first introduced, which would have provided a pathway to citizenship or amnesty for illegal immigrants brought to the U.S. as children. Then there was 2006, 2007. There was an attempt at comprehensive immigration reform, aka amnesty, attempted during President George W. Bush's second term. Again, this included a pathway to citizenship, meaning amnesty, but the efforts failed in Congress. Then we have 2012. President Barack Obama announced the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program, which provided temporary relief from deportation and work permits to eligible young undocumented immigrants. Now, DACA didn't exactly provide a pathway to citizenship, but it was offering some protection, and frankly, it was a gateway. Then we have 2013. There was the Gang of Eight, a bipartisan group of senators who drafted a major immigration reform bill that included a pathway to citizenship, which, you got it, means amnesty. The bill even passed the Senate, but was not taken up by the House of Representatives at the time. And then there was 2021. President Biden sent the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 to Congress, which again included a pathway to citizenship or amnesty for illegal aliens. So, over and over again, there have been attempts to just grant illegal aliens citizenship or amnesty. This is the end goal of this whole mass illegal migration thing, my friends. Those trying to cross the border know this, and as long as there is hope for such a thing to happen, then the nightmare will never stop. The very future of our representative republic is at stake here. It is only a matter of time before amnesty finds a way through if nothing is done about this untenable situation. Which then takes me back to this border security bill and the madness of the threshold mechanism. While this provision allows the Department of Homeland Security to shut down the border, if the Border Patrol encounters an average of 4,000 or more migrants over 7 days, and also if the encounters reach a 7-day average of 5,000, the border then would have to be shut down. But this just means that millions of people will continue to be allowed to cross the border. For example, let's use the figure of 5,000 encounters per day as a rough estimate for the number of crossings, and assume that this level of encounters occurred every day of the year. We're talking about up to 1.8 million crossings per year. Now granted, that's a theoretical maximum, but considering that our current administration is refusing to do anything to even curb the current influx of illegal immigrants, this doesn't seem to be too far of a stretch. Which then brings me back to something I touched on earlier, the part of the bill that would grant asylum recipients automatic worker permits. According to Reuters, they discussed this by saying that the bill was being criticized by right-wing Republicans for accepting a certain number of illegal immigrants per day and for providing automatic work permits to asylum recipients. This provision is seen as a potential magnet for more illegal immigration by House Majority Leader Steve Scalise. But of course, the bill's proponents are arguing that it is designed to overhaul the asylum system with tougher and quicker enforcement measures. But come on, my friends, automatic work permits for those who pass initial screenings? Seems like a massive incentive to me. The government, my friends, is doing everything in its power to thwart attempts at discouraging people from coming here illegally. We can see this with the continuing standoff between Texas and the Border Patrol in Shelby Park Eagle Pass. Right now, in the state of Texas, they have a brand new bill that was set to take effect today, called SB 4, and it would make it a state crime for illegal crossings. This new crime would be classified as a Class B misdemeanor, which can carry a punishment of up to 6 months in jail. And repeat offenders? Well, they could face a second-degree felony with a punishment of up to 2 to 20 years in prison. And the law would also allow Texas police to arrest immigrants who cross the border illegally between ports of entry. And the judge could drop the charges if the illegal alien agreed to return to Mexico. Now, there were exemptions. SB 4 did prohibit its enforcement in certain locations, including public or private primary or secondary schools, churches, synagogues, healthcare facilities, and facilities that provide forensic medical examinations to sexual assault survivors. But you see, we just can't have any actions taken that would discourage illegal aliens from crossing the border. The federal government is suing to stop the state from implementing this law. The U.S. Justice Department filed their lawsuit against the state of Texas, challenging SB 4 under the U.S. Constitution's Supremacy Clause and Foreign Commerce Clause. The lawsuit is arguing that immigration enforcement falls exclusively under federal control and that the Texas law interferes with the federal framework enacted by Congress. The federal government is essentially asserting that Texas cannot create its own immigration enforcement laws, while Texas officials argue for the state's right to enforce border security and immigration policies. The bottom line here, my friends, is that the federal government will continue to allow and encourage illegal immigration by the millions, and that the Democratic Party is hell-bent on turning this potential gold mine of voters into a reality. There just doesn't seem to be any concern for the well-being of American citizens. If this bill were to be passed into law, it would only help solidify the efforts to destroy our border and our nation's sovereignty, which would be followed by eventual passing of amnesty, forever changing this country in the process. That is the end game here. This is what's at stake. And that, my friends, will bring our episode to a close once more. From the To Be Frank Show, I am Adrian, and we'll see you all next time.